Welcome to the Sankofa Pan-African series. Please support us through Patreon and by buying me coffee so we can continue to bring you this series. Subscribe if you've not yet done so, and please turn on your notification button so you know when we have new episodes. Of course, share our videos with your contacts. By the early 1900s, black people were moving from the Carolinas, Georgia, and Alabama to other places like Occoe, Florida, where they found opportunities in the fruit-growing land of Orange County. Some of them were able to buy parcels of citrus groves, and their toil made them flourish. By 1920, some black residents of the areas were prosperous enough to purchase nice cars and even plan to send their children to college. No doubt, these hard-working African Americans believed in the ideas that had been propagated by Booker T. Washington, who advocated in his Atlanta Compromise speech in 1895 that if African Americans worked hard and acquired property, thereby becoming vital elements of the American society, white people will give them the votes. Their faith in Booker T's mantra was put to the test on the 2nd of November 1920 during the presidential election. The NAACP had taken the trouble to actively register black voters throughout Florida. But on the night of the election, a successful member of the black community, July Perry, who had helped broker land deals and arrange work for other people, made the mortal mistake of also registering black residents to vote. July Perry was apparently an extremely brave man to attempt what he did in an era where 90% of all law enforcement officers, judges, public servants, and lawyers were Klan's members. This admirable man, July Perry, whose only crime was to try and exercise his right to vote, was seized, beaten, shot, and lynched as a warning to other black citizens who dared to vote, or who dared to even think of voting. He turned out to be only one of several others who were killed and whose homes were burnt down during the massacre that followed in Occoe. During the rampage, some of the black people living in Occoe tried to flee for safety. Some were caught and shot. Others simply disappeared, never to be heard of ever again. On the 12th of December 1920, barely a month after the massacre, an advertisement appeared in the Orlando Sentinel, placed by one B.M. Sims, advertising some special bargains, and I quote, "Several beautiful little groves belonging to the Negroes that have just left Occoe must be sold." As it turned out, Sims was a Confederate veteran and one of the wealthiest white landowners in the area. According to the 1920 census, 255 black people and 560 white people lived in Occoe. Within months of the massacre, no more than two black residents remained. And between that period and well into the 1970s, not a single black person lived in the city. The brilliant Renaissance writer, the brilliant Harlem Renaissance writer, Zora Neale Hurston, tried to draw attention to this blight in 1939, because until recently, very little was said about it. Most people did not know what the black people had suffered in Occoe. Zora Neale Hurston gave her story the title The Occoe Riot, but apparently it was not deemed worthy of publication until 1989. In early September 1923, after 4 police officers were killed during a shootout with a black man in Johnston, Pennsylvania, the mayor of the city ordered all black and Mexican people who had lived in Johnstown for less than 7 years to leave the area. And he made no bones about the fact that he was going to rely on the Ku Klux Klan to enforce his order. An estimated 2,000 black and Mexican residents were forced out of the city, leaving their homes and other property behind. And black newspapers relentlessly covered the story, trying to draw national attention to it. But there are other ways to remove black people from their lands. Between the 1920s and the 1970s, chemical companies that made polychlorinated biphenyls or PCBs in Anniston, Alabama, knew that their products caused cancer and damaged human brains. Although the products that were compounds used as lubricants and insulators were eventually banned in the US in 1979, over 800 tons of PCBs had been released into a local canal. They also dumped 32,000 tons more into the city's open landfill. Naturally, in a predominantly black city like Anniston in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, black people suffered the most from the pollutants. There are still creeks there that are red, indicating the level of pollution. And of course, large parcels of land remain where vegetation cannot grow. In 2003, residents won a lawsuit worth hundreds of millions against Monsanto, the major pollutants, the major culprits. The over 18,000 complainants whose lives had been affected only received a few $1,000s. Homeowners whose properties had been rendered valueless by the degradation were only awarded $9,000 each for a whole house, while children whose future had been made bleak by intellectual disabilities and health struggles were only given $2,000 each. A clinic which was set up to treat some of the people made ill by the chemicals with some of the funds was so badly funded that it closed down in 2017, leaving people whose health had been destroyed to keep struggling with them. And please, don't make the mistake of thinking that it's all in the distant past. As recently as 1985, police fired tear gas, water cannons, and 10,000 rounds 10,000 rounds of ammunition into number 6221 Osage Avenue in West Philadelphia. After that, the officers dropped a satchel bomb onto the building from a helicopter. It was the same kind of bomb that was used in World War II and Vietnam. Now you may be wondering, just what kind of dangerous terrorists were inside the house? Well, there were 7 adults and 6 children who were members of the Occoe Black Liberation Group, MOVE, M-O-V-E. 2 of the inhabitants of the building miraculously survived. After the bombing, a fire broke out that claimed 61 surrounding buildings and left 250 people homeless in the middle-class black neighborhood. Half-hearted attempts were made to rebuild the burnt houses, which were replaced with very poor substandard structures, so that by 2010, over half of the rebuilt houses had been abandoned and boarded up because they were of such inferior quality. They were then, of course, promptly purchased for paltry sums by the city. So I have simply only attempted to pay homage to some of these black communities, but I enjoin you to dig deeper into this topic. The carnage they suffered cannot continue to be left hidden, unacknowledged, and properly compensated. The repercussions of these destructions are very much with us, even today. It is one of the reasons why there is such a wide disparity in the economic status of African Americans and others. The descendants of these communities are entitled to reparations, and a first step towards achieving that is to acknowledge that they happened. Just as the descendants of those whose communities were destroyed are still around, so also are the descendants of the white people who gained by destroying other communities. Now, while no one is saying that people of this generation are responsible for the misdeeds of their ancestors, they are, however, obliged to insist on finding ways to make reparations. It is an obligation which they must fulfill. Failure to do so is to continue the perpetuation of the oppression. Thanks for watching. Please support us through Patreon and by buying me coffee so we can continue to bring you this series. Subscribe if you've not done so. Turn on your notification buttons. And don't forget to share our videos with all your contacts. And of course, keep those comments coming. Thank you.